Our movie begins in USA, inside a circus, where there is a girl named Mila and her husband named Jim Prescott, who comes from a very wealthy family. Their daughter, Lucky, is sitting among the spectators, watching Mila's performances, and they seem to be enjoying them very much. While Lucky is eating from the strawberry plate because she loves them, Mila is surprised by a dangerous stunt, causing the horse to fall, and she loses her life in front of her husband and daughter. After this incident, Jim feels shocked by the loss of his beloved girlfriend and wife, which makes him retire from horses and hate them. He feels a great responsibility towards his little daughter, which drives him to leave her upbringing to her Aunt Cura, James Prescott's sister. The movie shows that Jim traveled to his old home and decided to return to his job in the railway industry, which distanced him from his daughter and his father's money, which he didn't need because he liked to be self-reliant. As we know, Lucky was raised in her grandfather James's house for 10 years, which made her motherless and fatherless. After several years, we go to James Prescott's villa, and we see Lucky in her room playing with a small squirrel. Her Aunt Cora enters and asks her to stop being mischievous and study her physics lessons. She tells her that her grandfather James will be running for the position of governor of the town, and they don't want any mischief. But Lucky tells her aunt that she feels bored, has no friends, doesn't go out, and doesn't see how studying the speed of the train and calculating the distance in the physics lesson will benefit her. She considers that information unnecessary filler, but in the end, she has to study. Then James enters and asks his daughter Cora to tie the bulldozer for him, as a delegation of officials, photographers, and journalists is scheduled to come to host them and talk to them about his election campaign. Cora reassures that Lucky will be obedient. After that, the squirrel returns to Lucky, but she tries to catch it. It escapes from her and starts running around the room until it exits the room. He jumps from the upper floor and gets tangled in a hanging rope, so Lucky jumps and gets caught in it. James opens the villa door with the guests and is surprised to find Lucky stuck by her legs in the rope from the ceiling. He discovers that the picture she was holding in her hand is torn, and the table in the middle of the room is on fire, while the squirrel jumps in front of him. The cameras capture that moment, and the photo is published with the news on the front page of the newspapers. After this incident, we see that James feels annoyed with Lucky, so he decides to send her to live with her father, Jim. We see Cora and Lucky in the train cabin afterward, on their way to her father, where Cora looks at her father's picture in the newspaper. Lucky feels upset because she is going to her father, who hasn't asked about her for 10 years, and she has never seen him before. She feels that her grandfather is punishing her by deciding to send her to her father. But Cora reassures Lucky that they will stay with Jim only for the summer, until her grandfather's election is over, and then they will return to him again. Cora defends Jim and tells Lucky that he had to leave her earlier because he wasn't able to handle the responsibility at that time, and that the decision was mutual among all of them. Lucky remains silent and does not comment. So Cora gets up to go and bring tea and cake from the train's cafeteria. Cora sticks her head out of the cabin, and here Lucky opens the train cabin window, noticing a unique and swift sight as she sees a group of wild horses racing alongside the train, stirring within her the love and connection to horses that she inherited from her mother Mila. Lucky steps out of the train cabin and starts moving between the train cars to catch up with the horses, but she reacts with excitement and begins to bounce cautiously on the edge of the car. Cora notices Lucky from the train window, so she runs towards the last carriage to save Lucky. Lucky manages to reach the last carriage of the train and holds onto the railing. The special horse approaches Lucky, and she tries to touch it, but she slips and almost falls. A person named Henderson saves her at the last moment, warning that those wild horses are very dangerous. Then her aunt comes. Thanks, Henderson, takes Lucky, and they return to the cabin after she reassures herself about him. After a little while, they arrive at the station and get off the train. Lucky feels disappointed because she doesn't see her father to welcome her. We see Henderson getting off the train with his men, telling them that he saw wild horses in the area while on the train and suggesting that they might catch and sell them. He hopes they can get return tickets and save some money because they are broke. Lucky hears Henderson and his men's plan, and she gets upset because it goes against it. Lucky finds a festival near the train station, takes advantage of her aunt's distraction, and goes to the festival where there is a horse show. Mr. Granger is presenting the show, and his daughter Pro is participating in the competition. Granger owns horse stables, and his daughter loves horses very much. We see one of the contestants showcasing on horseback, and when Lucky sees her, she resembles her mother a lot, so she gives her a badge that belonged to her mother. Lucky is very happy with this badge. Granger presents his daughter Pro, who gives a wonderful performance on her horse. We see Cora passing between the cows to reach Lucky because she felt worried when she couldn't find her. Then they meet a small boy named Snips, who has a little donkey with him, and Snips offers to take them to the place they want to go for 1 cent. Cora agrees and gives him the cents, and asks about Jim's house, to which Snipes tells her that he will take her there. Cora sits on the small donkey, but it can't bear it. So Snips leads her home and says to her, "We've arrived." Here comes Abigail, Snips' older sister, on her horse, and throws her rope at Snips and ties him up with it. Then she gets off her horse, takes a penny from Snips, and apologizes to Cora for Snips exploiting them. Since Abigail knows Lucky, he welcomes her with open arms. Mrs. Granger calls out Lucky's name because it is her turn in the horse competition she had participated in at the festival a little while ago. Abigail leaves, and then Cora learns the address of Jim's house, and they go there. Lucky keeps talking to her aunt about her sudden love for horses, telling her that when she saw two little girls her age riding horses, she loved the idea. But Cora feels hesitant to talk about horses because she doesn't want Lucky to become attached to them like her mother was, especially since they consider the love of horses to be the reason for Mila's death, Lucky's mother, because she trusted her horse too much, but it betrayed her and caused her fall and death. Upon their arrival, Jim feels embarrassed when he enters the house because it looks messy and disorganized. Lucky takes her upstairs to show her the room, and Jim has decorated her room with wallpaper adorned with strawberries because he knows she has loved them since she was little. He sees the badge with her and asks her where she got it from, and she tells him that she received it from her mother's friend. Jim says, "You've grown up and look a lot like your mother." Then they hear the sound of Cora screaming because she saw a mouse walking on its hind legs. Jim leaves Lucky and goes to see his ball. Lucky opens her bag to start drawing something in the wardrobe, but she notices that the wardrobe has a hole, and a secret room is visible behind it. Lucky pushes the wardrobe and actually discovers a secret room containing all her mother's clothes, accessories, and photos, in addition to old advertisements from when she used to perform horse shows. Lucky's hair falls apart and she lets it hang down, feeling that she has become just like her mother. Lucky is even happier when she hears the sound of the horse neighing that she heard when she was on the train, so she goes to the window to find that the sound is coming from a nearby place. Lucky hurriedly escaped from her room to the place where the horse was. You find a spacious place surrounded by pictures dedicated to horses, and there you hear the sound of a horse coming from inside the stable. It is clear that someone is torturing it inside the stable, and Pro is standing there. She asks her about this place, and she tells her that it is their stable, and that Granger, her father, rented it to people who work in the horse field. The stable door bursts open, and the horse appears running, with Henderson on its back, and it keeps running until it throws him off. The horse approaches Henderson to kick him, but Henderson dodges it and leaps over the fence. He tells Lucky that he advised her before to stay away from horses because they are dangerous. Then Henderson and his men gather and tie the horse up again with ropes, and they start torturing it. Pro goes to call her father and tells him what Henderson and his men are doing to the horses. Granger comes to yell at them, saying he won't let them hurt the horses. Henderson and his men feel embarrassed by Granger and apologize to him. Then Henderson tells his men that they will continue tomorrow. They secure the horse in the stable and leave. Henderson tells his men that if they can tame this horse, they will sell it for a large sum. After they left, Lucky untied the horse, sat with Bro for a while, and their relationship began to strengthen. After that, Lucky returned home, and when night came, Lucky was sitting at the dinner table with her father and aunt. Jim was holding the newspaper that had a picture of his father with the squirrel, and Lucky remembered that he might be angry about what happened to his grandfather, but she was surprised that he was laughing hard. Lucky seized the opportunity and mentioned to her father that she wanted to raise a horse. Jim expressed his strong discontent, especially since he knew she meant the wild, unruly horse in the stable. Jim closed the topic firmly and told her that he rejected the idea of having a horse in her life because he couldn't forget what happened to her mother in the past. Lucky felt frustrated and went to her room. The next day, Lucky woke up and went straight out to check on the horse. She arrived at the horse stable again and untied the rope, and Bro started talking to her about horses, pointing out that wild horses need special training and patience, and that she must show the horse her trust in it until they get used to each other. Lucky benefited from Pro's advice and offered the horse a potato, but it refused. Then she gave him an apple, and at first he didn't like it, but when he ate it, he liked it a lot. Lucky felt happy because he ate from her hand. Later, I went to Jim's and found a barrel of apples in front of the house, so I gathered some apples from it and gave them to the horse. Lucky continued to feed the horse apples throughout the night, and the horse was happy. Her friends, Bro and Abigail, were with her, while Henderson stood on the other side, eating apples as well, watching what they were doing with the horse, which made him feel that the horse was starting to like Lucky. Lucky rode the horse, and Snips was with her. Snips opened the barn door for the horse, and the horse bolted wildly with Lucky, heading towards the mountains. Bro and Abigail hurried behind them on horseback to rescue them. Snape felt worried and went to tell her father, who was talking to Granger about Lucky. Jim and Granger rushed to save Lucky, and in the meantime, Lucky was riding a horse along the mountain slopes, with her friends guiding her to maintain her balance. The slope was cracked, so they asked her to jump off the horse to them so they could save her. Lucky jumped at the last moment and managed to jump off the horse. Jim and Granger arrived, and Jim was extremely worried about Lucky, scolding her for not listening to his advice. He took her back home and continued to scold her, saying she was very stubborn. They decided to return her to her grandfather and aunt, which increased their sadness. Lucky was upset with her father and told him that he was abandoning her for the second time, and she left her room angrily. At night, Lucky sneaked past her father and aunt, left the house with her bag, took the apples, and headed towards the forest, walking along the same direction as the railway track, until she found the horse she loved, named Spirit, and discovered his family. They gathered around her, and she offered them all apples, which they happily ate. Henderson and his men appeared, armed with horses and ropes, to catch the horses. Lucky tried to stop him, but Henderson pushed her away. The train arrived, and Henderson and his men began loading the horses into the train cars, but they couldn't catch Spirit. Lucky heard that they would travel by train to the port to board the ship with the horses, and she returned to the city in the morning, while Spirit was confident that she would help him and bring his family back. Lucky goes to the Granger stable and finds Bro there. Lucky tells her about the horse kidnapping that happened a little while ago, and that they must retrieve them before they are loaded onto the ship. So she takes out a map and tells her that the port is very far from them, and that they won't catch the train before it arrives. Lucky remembers the physics lessons she didn't like, and realizes they have their benefits. You calculate the train's speed with distance and time, and you tell Bro that the train stops at a station every 100 miles. Lucky points to the place where they are supposed to stop, which is a station with a water tank, and tells her that if they take a shortcut to the water tank through the mountains, they will reach the train by noon, because they need the train to be stopped to unload the horses from its carriages. Abigail comes, learns from them what happened, and hears their plan. At first, they hesitate to help her, but they can't leave her to face this adventure alone, so they decide to go with her on their horses. Lucky is with Spirit, and they head towards the mountains. They reach a plateau, with a valley beneath it, and discover that the bridge connecting it to another plateau has collapsed. They try to jump with their horses from a closer spot. Lucky comes to jump with Spirit, but his feet trip, and he falls into the valley. He is not harmed, and Spirit manages to get out of the valley one by one. They find a path made of narrow and dangerous mountain rocks, but they proceed with caution. Lucky starts crossing the narrow rocks with Spirit, while Pro and Abigail follow with their horses. Everyone successfully crosses this place and reaches the water tank, where they decide to spend the night. The next morning, they go to the water tank, where the train is supposed to have arrived. Granger enters his stable and finds Snipes, who informs him that Pro, Abigail, and Lucky have gone to free the wild horses from the gang that kidnapped them. Granger is worried about his daughter, and he quickly heads to Jim's house to tell him that their daughters are in danger and to explain what happened. Jim is also worried about his daughter, and he heads to a shed next to his house, where he keeps the high-speed train he named Mila in honor of his wife. He takes the locomotive and sets off to rescue their daughters, and Cora goes with them. Lucky hears the sound of the train while she is sleeping, so she wakes up quickly and sees Spurt running towards the train. Realizing that the train has arrived ahead of schedule, they head towards Abigail and all set off towards the train. But Henderson sees Spurt and orders his men to tie him up with ropes and load him onto the train with them. They do that, and of course Lucky and her friends can't save the horses because the train is moving fast. Lucky feels despair, especially since Spurt has been caught. But her friends encourage her and tell her that they have a chance to quickly go to the port and catch the train there. Lucky felt encouraged and went with her friends to the port, where they actually found the train and the ship. Lucky managed to board the train and enter the carriage containing Spirit, and she was able to get him out of the carriage. But they discovered that the rest of the horses had been loaded onto the ship. Lucky jumped over the ship with great boldness. Jim, Cora, and Granger had arrived by train, and when Jim saw Lucky jumping onto the ship, he became worried, especially since the ship had already set sail. So Jim and Cora took a boat and pursued the ship. On board the ship, Lucky went downstairs and found the place where the horses were kept, and she got out of it. Henderson and his men tried to catch Spirit with ropes, but he resisted them. However, Henderson managed to bind him with the ropes. Lucky climbed onto Spirit and rode it, then set off towards Henderson, causing it to fall into the sea. Then Jim and his aunt saw them coming in the boat, so Spirit jumped into the sea, followed by the rest of the horses. Jim jumped into the water to save Lucky, and Spirit was able to lift them from under the water. Everyone managed to reach the beach and everyone was happy. Lucky apologized to her father, but he apologized to her in turn, saying that if her mother were alive, she would have acted just like her. He told her that he was very proud of her and hugged her, and for the first time, Lucky felt a father's tenderness. Henderson was handcuffed to be handed over to the police, while Lucky's Spirit and the other horses were bid farewell after being taken to the forest to live there amidst the nature